From the outside, the mansion glowed under the warmth of the late morning sun, standing proudly at the top of the hill like a fortress of wealth and privilege. Its tall glass doors sparkled, catching rays of sunlight and scattering them like diamonds across the trimmed lawn. The garden stretched wide in symmetrical perfection, roses lined like soldiers on parade, their petals kissed by dew. A marble fountain stood at the center, spraying water in arcs so delicate they shimmered like strands of crystal in the air. The pool, vast and glittering, reflected the sky with such clarity that one might believe heaven itself had descended into its depths. To the eyes of any passer-by, it was paradise, a place where success had not just arrived but had built itself a home. Yet inside, past the polished wood doors and within the vast marble halls, there was a silence far heavier than gold, the kind of silence that echoes not from peace, but from something missing, something unspoken, something wrong. The air seemed to hold its breath within those velvet-decorated rooms, and the weight of it pressed down on anyone who dared listen too closely. It was a silence interrupted not by laughter, not by music, not by warmth, but only by the soft whimpering of a little girl. Her name was Sophia. She was 6 years old, with wide brown eyes that shimmered like autumn leaves when caught in the sun. Her hair fell in soft waves, and her pink polka-dot dress hung slightly crooked because she had tugged on it nervously all morning. She had a smile that could melt even the hardest of hearts, a smile that could light up even the darkest of rooms. But on that day, her smile was nowhere to be seen. Tears rolled down her round cheeks, tracing paths that glistened against the light, her lips trembling as she clung desperately to the arms of Maria, the maid who had only been hired months ago but who already held Sophia as though she were her own child. Sophia was special. Born with Down syndrome, her innocence was both her shield and her vulnerability. Though her father, Alejandro, loved her dearly, his constant business trips left her too often in the care of others. And what he did not know, what he had been too blinded by trust to notice, was that not everyone treated Sophia with the tenderness she deserved. Her stepmother, Elena, was a woman polished to perfection. She wore pearls that glistened against her throat, pressed suits that made her appear powerful and untouchable, and a face that was beautiful yet cold, the kind of beauty that did not invite warmth but demanded admiration. To her, Sophia was nothing more than an inconvenience, a shadow of a life she wished had never touched her perfect image. To Elena, the little girl represented imperfection, complication, and worst of all a reminder of a past that did not belong to her carefully crafted future. Elena's heart was colder than the marble floors she walked upon. Her patience was thinner than the delicate silk scarves she draped across her shoulders. Too often her voice rose in sharp commands, too often her finger pointed in blame toward the child for tantrums, accidents, or simple mistakes that all children make. And that morning, in broad daylight, with the golden sun streaming through the grand windows, Elena's anger erupted again. Her words were sharp, her tone slicing the air like a blade, and the child's tears spilled faster. "Why can't you ever do anything right?" Elena's voice hissed across the room, echoing against the marble walls. Sophia flinched, clutching at her dress, her wide eyes brimming with confusion more than guilt, because she did not fully understand why the woman before her was so angry. But before Elena's fury could deepen, before her words could cut further, Maria, the maid with hands rough from years of labor and a heart softened by empathy, did something no one had ever dared to do. She stepped forward, her arms wrapping around the trembling girl, shielding her small body with her own. "It's enough," Maria whispered, her voice trembling but firm. She stood rooted to the spot, refusing to move, her embrace like a fortress between Sophia and the storm before her. And this was the very moment Alejandro returned home. The millionaire father, who had left at dawn for an important meeting that was supposed to last all day, had cut his schedule short and walked back into the house earlier than expected. His footsteps echoed down the long corridor, measured and strong, the sound of a man who had built empires, conquered boardrooms, and carved his name into the world of the powerful. Yet nothing could have prepared him for the sight that froze him in place as he reached the living room. His wife, elegant, beautiful, enraged, stood with her finger raised in fury. His maid, her uniform plain, her body trembling, her arms fiercely protective, cradled his daughter tightly against her chest, and his little girl, his beloved Sophia, was red-faced, trembling, her tears soaking into Maria's shoulder as she clung as if her very life depended on it. Alejandro's world shifted in that instant. The polished image of his perfect home cracked wide open, and behind it was a truth he had been too distracted to see. His eyes darted from Elena's sharp expression to Maria's protective stance, and finally to Sophia's desperate grip. He felt as though the ground beneath him had tilted, revealing a chasm of neglect and pain he had never noticed because he had been too consumed with contracts, deadlines, and the endless chase of wealth. Before I continue, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, in standing up for those who cannot always protect themselves, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone you care about, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe to our channel, Kindness Corner. Your support helps us spread stories of compassion and courage to the world. Alejandro's mind raced as he stood in the doorway. This was a man who had fought tooth and nail to build his empire, a man who could read the intentions of investors and rivals in mere seconds, a man who had always prided himself on control. Yet in that moment, in his own home, he felt utterly blindsided. He saw Maria's arms, a trembling yet unwavering, a protecting Sophia with a love that cost her everything. He saw Elena's anger, a side of her he had excused too many times as stress, as pressure, as fleeting moods. And he saw his daughter's tears, her tiny hands gripping Maria's blouse as if she knew instinctively who her true protector was. In the days that followed, Alejandro found himself unable to ignore the questions burning inside him. He moved quietly through the house, observing without announcing his watchful eyes, and slowly, painfully, the truth unfolded like an unspoken confession. Elena's patience with Sophia was always short-lived. Her tone was cold, her affection absent, her words too often coated with irritation rather than love. In contrast, Maria's every action toward the child was filled with gentleness. She read to her in the afternoons, her voice animated, her smile patient. She sang small songs while folding laundry, letting Sophia hum along in her sweet, imperfect way. She carried her when she was too tired to walk, her arm steady and strong, her gaze tender. Alejandro noticed something else too, Sophia's laughter. It had been rare in recent months, so rare he hadn't realized how much it had disappeared until he heard it again. That bright, musical laughter bubbled from the little girl whenever Maria was near, and with each laugh, each smile, each moment of trust directed toward the maid, Alejandro's heart ached with the realization of how blind he had been. Maria, however, carried her own secret pain. Behind her gentle smile was a history Alejandro had never thought to ask about. She had grown up in poverty, her childhood carved by hardship. From her teenage years, she had worked tirelessly to support her siblings after the death of their parents. The job at the mansion was not just employment for her, it was survival. But what she hadn't expected, what she hadn't dared to imagine, was that within those cold marble walls she would find a child who reminded her of her own little brother. Her brother, too, had been born with Down syndrome, a boy with the same innocent eyes, the same tender soul, the same vulnerability. He had been bullied and mistreated by others, until Maria, a young and unafraid, had stepped in to defend him time and time again. In Sophia, Maria saw her brother's spirit reborn, and in her heart, she made a vow that she would never let harm touch this little girl the way harm had once touched her brother. As daylight poured into the house each morning, Alejandro lingered longer at home, silently watching the dynamic he had ignored for far too long. The truth no longer hid in shadows. It stood before him, undeniable as wife's coldness, Maria's quiet courage, his daughter's desperate need for real love. And it tore at him. The confrontation did not come immediately. Alejandro was not a man who rushed into judgment, not in business, not in life. He observed, he calculated, he weighed every detail before making his move. And so, in those first few days after witnessing Maria defend Sophia, he kept his silence. But silence, in his case, was not ignorance anymore, it was strategy. He lingered at home more than usual, excusing himself from meetings, allowing his assistant to handle smaller affairs. When Elena questioned his sudden presence, he offered vague explanations. Just wanted to spend more time at home, he would say casually, though beneath the calm exterior, his heart was no longer at peace. He was a man studying his own life, piecing together fragments he had once ignored. And in those fragments, the truth sharpened. One morning, Alejandro walked quietly into the kitchen, unannounced. Just as Maria was pouring Sophia a small glass of milk, Elena sat at the counter, tapping her phone impatiently, scrolling through online boutiques, her pearl necklace gleaming against the morning light. Sophia, her legs swinging from the chair, giggled as Maria drew a little smiley face with chocolate syrup on her pancakes. "Good morning, princess," Maria said softly, setting the plate before her. Sophia's face lit up. "Happy pancake," she squealed, clapping her hands. Alejandro, standing at the doorway, smiled faintly at the pure joy in his daughter's voice. But his smile faded when Elena looked up, her eyes narrowing. "Maria, is this necessary? Pancakes are messy enough without you turning breakfast into a circus." Elena's tone was sharp, cutting. Sophia's smile faltered instantly. Her little hands hovered over the plate, unsure if she should eat. She looked at Maria, her brown eyes searching for reassurance. Maria kept her voice steady, though Alejandro could see her hand tremble slightly. "She eats better when she's happy, say a tilde plus minus aura. It helps her enjoy the meal." Elena rolled her eyes, muttering something under her breath. Alejandro stepped forward then, his voice calm but firm. "She's eating, isn't she? That's what matters." Elena blinked, caught off guard by his sudden defense. She forced a smile, brushing off the tension. "Of course, darling, I just don't want her spoiled with unnecessary nonsense." But Alejandro had seen enough. He caught the flicker of relief in Maria's eyes, the way Sophia dug into her pancake once she knew her father had spoken. That night, Alejandro could not sleep. He lay awake beside Elena, staring at the ceiling of their lavish bedroom, the chandeliers above glinting faintly in the dark. He thought of the way Maria had looked at Sophia, not as an obligation, but with genuine affection. He thought of Elena's dismissive words, her lack of patience, her disdain. And he thought of himself, of how he had been absent, how he had been so consumed with power and money that he had failed to notice the quiet suffering of his little girl. His empire stretched across cities, but his own home, the one place that should have been unshakable, was fractured. The next afternoon brought the breaking point. Alejandro had returned earlier than usual again. As he stepped into the foyer, he heard voices rising from the living room. Elena's sharp tone cut through the silence. "How many times have I told you not to touch things that aren't yours? Look what you've done." Alejandro quickened his steps. He turned the corner and saw Sophia standing by the coffee table. A small glass of juice spilled across its surface. Her little hands trembled as she tried to wipe it with her dress. Elena towered over her, finger raised, eyes blazing. "Do you ever learn? Do you understand anything at all?" Sophia whimpered, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. Maria rushed forward instantly, kneeling beside the child, pulling a napkin from her apron to clean the mess. "It's just juice, say a tilde plus minus aura," Maria said gently, trying to shield Sophia with her body. "No harm done." But Elena's voice rose further, fury spilling unchecked. "No harm done? She ruins everything. Every single day it's something. I will not live in a house where enough." Alejandro's voice cut through the room like a strike of thunder. It was steady, controlled, but beneath it was the force of a man whose patience had snapped. The room froze. Elena turned, her mouth still half open, shocked at his interruption. Maria froze too, still crouched on the floor, her arms around Sophia. The little girl clung to her maid's blouse, her face buried in her chest, sobs muffled. Alejandro stepped forward, his tall frame casting a shadow across the room. His eyes locked on Elena's, and for the first time in their marriage, she faltered under his gaze. "What exactly are you doing?" Alejandro asked, his voice low but searing. Elena stammered, regaining her composure. She spilled juice all over the table. "Alejandro, she needs discipline, she needs love," he interrupted, his voice firm. "She needs patience. She needs someone who sees her for who she is, not as a burden." Elena's eyes widened. "Are you implying I don't care for her?" "I am saying what I've seen with my own eyes," Alejandro replied, his tone unyielding. He looked at Sophia, trembling in Maria's embrace, then back at his wife. "For months, I ignored the signs. I told myself you were stressed, that I was imagining things. But I cannot unsee what I've seen. I cannot undo the way you speak to her, and I will not allow my daughter to grow up believing she is unwanted in her own home." The silence that followed was thick, broken only by Sophia's soft sobs. Elena's face paled, her lips pressed tight, her hand shaking slightly though she tried to hide it. Maria, still kneeling, whispered softly to Sophia, rocking her gently, "It's okay, Mini A tilde plus minus A, you're safe." Alejandro turned his eyes toward the maid. He saw not fear in her expression, but a fierce determination, the same determination he had witnessed days earlier when she stood between Sophia and anger. Maria did not flinch, even though she knew her job and her livelihood hung in the balance. Alejandro felt something shift deep within him. For years, he had believed strength meant power, control, wealth. But in that moment, strength looked very different. It looked like a woman with nothing to her name but her heart, protecting a child with a courage that came at great risk. "Elena," he said finally, his voice steady but cold, "you have failed her." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Elena flinched as if struck. "You failed to give her love," Alejandro continued, his tone unwavering. "You failed to protect her spirit. You failed as her stepmother." Elena's composure cracked. "Alejandro, how can you say that after everything?" "Because it is the truth," he interrupted sharply, "and I can no longer lie to myself. Money can buy houses, cars, companies, but not kindness, not love, not protection. Those are given freely, without expectation." And he gestured toward Maria, who was still cradling Sophia. "Has given my daughter more of those things in a few months than you have in years." The room fell into silence once again. Elena's face twisted, her pride battling her fear. "So what now? You choose the maid over me?" Alejandro's jaw tightened. He did not answer immediately, because the answer was not as simple as choosing one person over another. It was about choosing truth over lies, choosing love over appearances, choosing his daughter over his own pride. Sophia lifted her head then, her cheeks streaked with tears. She looked at her father, her little voice breaking through the silence. "Pepe broken bar Maria safe." The words were simple, but they pierced Alejandro's heart deeper than any argument could. Out of the mouths of the innocent came the truth he could no longer deny. Alejandro walked forward and gently stroked his daughter's hair, his voice softening. "Yes, Princessa, Maria is safe." He looked up, his eyes locking with Elena's one last time. "And I will make sure you are safe too, always." The decision was made. The course of their lives had shifted forever.